It's been 7 years. It's been almost 3/4 of a decade since Persona 5 came out in Japan, and here we are without Persona 6 and with another Persona 5 spin-off. When Persona 5 Tactica was leaked back in June, followed by its official announcement a few days later, it was met with mostly an audible shrug, and I think had Persona 3 Reload and Metaphor ReFantasio also not been announced at the same time, I think the feedback would have been a lot more negative. Persona 5 has just been milked so much to the point where even some of the most die-hard Persona 5 fans I know are starting to get tired of it and feel oversaturation with these spin-offs. What most of us want is Persona 6, and if we are going to get another Persona 5 spin-off, well, I think what we all wanted was Persona 5 Arena. In the coming months leading up to this game's release, I wasn't really thinking much about it, and when I remembered that it was coming out, I started to get a bit worried about how it was going to turn out, because Atlus didn't really seem too interested in promoting this game either, not when compared to Persona 3 Reload, and they didn't even send out review codes before release, at least not to smaller journalists and YouTubers like myself, hence why I'm doing an impressions video, not a full review. Although I will do one, but it won't be until after I'm done with the game. I wanted to get this video out just so that I could give my thoughts on it, despite me not being very far in, because even though I'm only a few hours in, I actually have a lot to say about this game, and most of it is actually positive. Granted, like I said, my expectations weren't very high, but Persona 5 Tactica surprised me with how much fun it is. This game is a turn-based tactical RPG developed internally by P Studio. You might immediately be expecting me to compare it to Atlus's other tactical RPGs like Majin Tensei or Devil Survivor, but Tactica doesn't play like either of those games. It actually plays more like XCOM and Mario plus Rabbids. Each team takes turns moving, and the idea is to figure out the best way to take on the enemy team while making use of cover, hazards, and other obstacles. The way it works is that when you're hiding behind cover, you'll take either reduced or no damage depending on the angle you're being hit from and the size of the object you're hiding behind. And while behind cover, you can either attack by shooting or by using your personas. You can either play it safe and stay behind cover while taking reduced damage, or you can play aggressively and force the enemies out of cover by charging them. When you get close enough to an enemy, you can do a melee attack which will force the target out of cover and or knock it back. This can be used to gain a bunch of tactical advantages, like knocking enemies toward hazards, allies, or other enemies so that they can get caught in the blast radius of your other attacks, and most importantly, so that they can be vulnerable to critical hits. Just like in Persona 5, you're rewarded for landing critical hits, and doing so here gives you an extra turn. And here, after enemies get knocked out of cover, you'll see a get him over your selection when targeting them. This means that your next attack is guaranteed to be a critical hit, although there are other ways to get extra turns and critical hits too. After you do get a critical hit, sometimes if your allies are in the right positions, you can do a triangle attack, where you'll unleash a powerful all-out attack on any enemies in range. As with any strategy game, it's important to learn how this system works and how to use these tools to your advantage. And there are a lot of different options and plenty of different ways to go about how you play. And the best strategy also depends on the map, the mission, and the enemies themselves. And there are some enemies that have gimmicks that you need to work around to take out. Like some enemies will always counter you no matter what, so you need to lure them out with ranged attacks before attacking. There's also plenty of variety with objectives, like sometimes you need to escape, sometimes you need to capture an objective, sometimes you need to escort a VIP to the end of the level, stuff like that. Now, this is all well and good, but it definitely feels like things have been streamlined for a much more simple experience. For one thing, party members don't level up individually. Instead, the entire party shares a single experience bar. You can also equip weapons, but it's only guns now, and you can only send 3 allies into battle at a time. Also, there's no more wildcard for Joker. However, they did bring back the sub-persona system from Q, where every character has their base persona that they can't get rid of, but also a secondary persona that affects their stats and gives them additional skills. Although here, sub-personas can only have 2 skills, their base skill and whichever one you pass on to them through fusion. Although there aren't quite as many personas either, and you can only fuse 2 at a time. There are also no elemental affinities, like no elemental weaknesses or resistances or anything like that. I wasn't a big fan of this at first, but now I kinda like it because this makes your performance less about how you prepare and more about how well you play. And even though you can't use elements to strike weaknesses, the different elements do have different effects, like wind attacks for example knock the targets back, psychic attacks hypnotize the enemies and cause them to move forward, and dark and fire attacks hit enemies in a radius, allowing you to hit more than one at once. Although there's also friendly fire in this game, so be careful. Your main personas also don't level up either. Instead, you teach them new skills through a skill tree system, which is pretty neat. And if you need to rearrange your skills, you can just unequip skills to get your points back and use them on something else. I'll be honest, I've been playing on Merciless difficulty and I haven't been having much trouble as far as difficulty goes. The worst thing I've had happen during battle is I've had a few of my party members die and or I've missed one or more of the optional objectives, but that's another neat thing about this game. You're rewarded for completing optional objectives in every mission. Now, the story for this game, I don't know if it's because of the aforementioned burnout with Persona 5 at this point, but for me, this game's story isn't really doing it any favors. It's basically some Japanese politician that totally will not have any story relevance goes missing at the beginning of the game, then there's an earthquake, and then the Phantom Thieves are inexplicably transported to Disney World, where Patrick's evil French cousin is doing evil stuff, and then we gotta team up with Atlas's new spin-off waifu to stop her. Maybe it gets better later on, but I'll give them some credit. The introduction is pretty short, and the cutscenes aren't horribly long, even though they do still feel longer than necessary. The art is also something I'm kind of mixed on. It seems to take heavy inspiration from the Q series art style, but it just doesn't look as good, especially in 3D form. I don't know if it's the big hands and feet and the stubby little fingers, or the weird 20s cartoon anatomy, but maybe this will grow on me too. At least the music is great, and so is the voice acting. I've heard from people that have finished this game that it takes around 35 to 40 hours to beat, which is pretty lengthy for a strategy RPG like this. Let's just hope that this game stays fun throughout the entire time. It's hard for me to say if I would recommend this game based on the short time I've played it, especially for $60, but at the very least, Black Friday is just around the corner, so if there are any deals on this game, for that, it'd probably be worth a purchase. I'd also say that, given this game's streamlined features, it could be a good gateway into the tactical RPG genre if you've never played any games like it. Even if you've never played a Persona game before, this isn't really a bad place to start, although there will be minor spoilers for Persona 5, but I say that like Persona 5 doesn't have the most predictable story in JRPG history. But yeah, my overall impressions of Tactica are that it's a good game, but please, Atlas, for the love of Record Scratch, let this be the last Persona 5 spin-off, at least until Persona 6 comes out. When that game comes out and starts getting milked dry, be sure to give Persona 5 some love every now and then, okay? As always, guys, be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe. Be sure to tell me what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Especially if you're watching this video after Persona 5 Tactica has been out long enough for you to beat it. Does the game get better? Does it get worse? You know, be sure to leave a comment telling me what you think. As always, be sure to check out my other links in the description, and until the next video, I will see you all later.